We have all been lost at least once in our lives, and I am personally really good at it. I've driven a quarter of a mile down a one-lane road and had to reverse all the way back. I thought I could get home from the airport once without a map and ended up in the middle of cornfields 30 minutes from my house. I've even taken a wrong turn and gotten lost for an hour on the same highway twice. Getting lost is never fun. It's a waste of time and, well, in this case, my gas money. Much like being physically lost, at some point everyone is going to find themselves in a season of wandering. And I've also been there, and it's not fun either. We're really good at getting sidetracked, and we end up wandering aimlessly through life. We wonder how we got here, what we're doing, who we are, and where everyone else even is. And in those times, we need to be reminded of the goal, the bigger picture. We need a guide. Today, we're going to talk about what to do when life has us sidetracked. Our THP this week is back on track. When we're feeling lost and confused, we have to be intentional about getting back on track with God. This week, we'll be looking at the story of Haggai. Some of you may never have heard of this character in the Bible, and that's because he only takes up approximately 3 pages of the Bible. But while he might not get a ton of airtime, he is certainly an important supporting character in the story God has written. Haggai was a prophet. He tells the Israelite people what God is telling them. At this point in our story, God's people have just been set free from 40 years of slavery to the Babylonians and have finally been able to go back to their home. Only there's no home left. Everything has been destroyed and their whole lives lay before them in ruin. That's the setting for the book of Haggai. God is speaking to the recently freed Israelites who are trying to rebuild their life back home. And this is what God has to say to them. Then the Lord sent this message through the prophet Haggai. Why are you living in luxurious houses while my house lies in ruins? This is what the Lord of Heaven's army says. Look at what is happening to you. You have planted much, but you harvest little. You eat, but are not satisfied. You drink, but are still thirsty. You put on clothes, but you cannot keep warm. Your wages disappear as though you were putting them in pockets filled with holes. This is what the Lord of Heaven's army says. Look at what is happening to you. Has God ever said that to you? Has he ever shouted, wake up? Do you see where you are letting yourself live? Look how far you have wandered from my presence. In verse 3, God tells us that his people have left the temple where they go to worship in ruins. Instead of rebuilding God's house, they are busy building up their own houses. They're seeking their own riches and their own agenda. God is not number one in his people's hearts. They're living selfish, materialistic, and spiritually dead lives. God speaks through Haggai to wake them up. He tells them that they are lost and that they are far from his heart. They are chasing after all the wrong things. And just like us so much of the time, they are sidetracked. God's answer to the Israelites' wandering is to send Haggai. And God has an answer to our wanderings as well. While we're seeking our own priorities, our own material things, our own desires, God sends Haggai to us too. Well, now I don't mean a literal ancient Israelite prophet, but I mean my parents, my student pastor, my leaders, and my friends. The reality is that God didn't need to use Haggai to share his message to the people. He could have done it himself in a loud, thundering voice, sharp as a double-edged sword, and I promise the Israelites would have gotten right to work. But God chose to work through Haggai, to include him in the story he was writing. God called him to speak the truth, to warn the people and to save them from what they were doing to themselves. God calls our leaders and friends to do the same for us. When we're sidetracked and want to get back on track, we have to start seeking truth. And that comes from the Haggai in our own life. It comes from the hard conversation or the intentional relationship that tells us what God is saying. Maybe it's a conversation that makes you realize that you're deep in the depths of your own sin. Maybe it's a parent who's able to challenge you to make better decisions about what you're watching or listening to. Maybe your Haggai is even a servant who just loves you so well that you're able to be reminded that God can love you too. When your Haggai speaks, listen. It is God speaking to you through them. On the other hand, God may be calling you to be a Haggai in a friend or a sibling's life. You may be on track and running hard after the presence of God, but see someone else who used to be running with you going off in a new direction or beginning to slow down. If you feel that God is moving in you to tell them the truth in love, do it. Be the Haggai they are waiting for. It won't be easy, but it can be the difference for them between a life with or without God. Use the story of Haggai as an encouragement. Because Haggai was willing to speak God's truth and wake the people up, they got back on track. In fact, the story goes on and it tells us the whole remnant of the people obeyed the voice of the Lord their God and the message of the prophet Haggai, because the Lord their God had sent him and the people feared the Lord. Then Haggai, the Lord's messenger, gave this message to the Lord to the people. I am with you, declares the Lord. And they came and began to work on the house of the Lord Almighty, their God, on the 24th day of the 6th month. Much like the Israelites returned to work on the temple of God, we have the chance to return and to build up our temples. Because Christ lives in us, he tells us that we are his temple, and we have to make sure that we take care of the place where God lives. If you need to speak truth over someone else's life, be Haggai. If you need to get back on track, this is your wake-up call. Just listen and begin the work to rebuild your foundation on the truth of God.
Hey there, thanks so much for checking out our YouTube channel. You're still here, so why not stay a while? Go ahead and drop a like and click that red button so you can enjoy some fresh new Northview Students content every single week. You don't want to miss a thing. We promise that you're going to be challenged, encouraged, and most importantly, inspired. So what are you waiting on, fam? Join us.